The story of a family hoping for a new life in Canada ended in tragedy 13 years ago in Regina, Saskatchewan. There are still many unanswered questions surrounding the triple murder of the tumaw family. Gray Natu, 31, his wife Mama, 28, and their 3-year-old son, 7 June 2, were found dead in their home at 323 Oakview Drive on August 6, 2010. The family were Karen refugees who had moved to Saskatchewan from a refugee camp on the Thailand-Burma border in 2008, with hopes for a better life. 2 years later, Ma was pregnant with their second child. Gray is described as a good father who took care of his family. He was a supervisor at Crown Shred and Recycling, while Ma was a stay-at-home mother. They were members of Regina's New Friends in Christ Church. They were happy and settling into a new country, having left behind the turmoil in their native country. Despite being happy that they were together and in a safe place, the family were having problems making ends meet. The church would sometimes help out. On August 6, 2010, 4 days after Gray was scheduled to return to work after a week off, and after the family hadn't been seen for a few days, neighbors started smelling a foul odor from the family's townhouse. They notified the property manager, who discovered the bodies and contacted the police. The exact cause of death was never released, though police have always referred to it as a triple murder, while specifying that it was not a shooting. Neighbors remembered that the family kept to themselves. 7 June would often be seen looking out of the front window, and Ma usually didn't leave home without Gray. Neighbors also noticed that a lot of shady people would come and go from the residence, and Gray would double and triple check that his doors were locked when leaving the home. Investigators have been quoted as saying this is the worst incident of multiple homicides in Regina's history. The investigation since August 2010 has been comprehensive, involving as many as 25 Regina Police Service members, as well as investigators from the RCMP, FBI, and other law enforcement agencies. In spite of the collaboration and investigative techniques such as the use of an investigator fluent in the Karen and Burmese culture, and languages assisting for years in the investigation, the murders have not been solved. The case was designated a cold case on August 6, 2015. In August 2015, police spokesman Les Parker reiterated the fact that there are persons of interest in this case. The matter is that there is not enough evidence to lead to conviction. We don't yet have enough information to hold the person or persons responsible accountable in court. We will still work toward this goal. Since July 30, 2014, police have offered a $50,000 reward to anyone with information that could help the case. If you are not yet subscribed to the channel, please do so. Like and share the video, and we'll see you in the next one.
My name is Dean Ray. I'm the Deputy Chief here at the Regina Police Service. I'm going to start by reading a brief statement, and then I'll answer your questions as they come after that, if that's okay with you guys. On August 6th, 2010, Gray Natu, 31 years, Mama, his wife of 28 years old, and their son, 7 June 2, 3 years, were found deceased at their residence at 323 Oakview Drive in Regina. The victims were Karen refugees from a Thailand refugee camp who had lived in Regina for the previous 2 years. This tragic event led to a comprehensive 5-year-long investigation, with at times involving as many as 25 Regina Police Service members. A team of Regina Police Service members worked full-time on the case, as well as investigators from the RCMP and other law enforcement agencies. The Regina Police Service investigative team worked in conjunction with other agencies, utilized numerous investigative techniques throughout the course of this investigation. To date, over 200 interviews have been conducted, with the majority involving Karen-speaking people. Language and cultural differences were identified as a significant obstacle from the start of this investigation. Throughout the investigation, the investigative team worked closely with the Ministry of Justice Public Prosecutions Division. Meetings and consultations occurred, and at this time, we do not have the evidence necessary to proceed with the charge. This file and investigation has been assigned to our cold case coordinator. The cold case coordinator's responsibility will be to continue the investigation by completing outstanding tasks and follow up on any new information that comes to light. I want to stress this file is not closed, and we are committed to solving this file. I would also like to emphasize there's still an outstanding $50,000 reward for anyone with information that leads to the arrest and conviction of those responsible. This is one of the largest and most comprehensive investigations conducted by the Regina Police Service. And those are my comments.
So can you just expand, I guess, on what it actually means to have a cold case? Obviously, I know it's a historical case, but what fundamentally changes after that?
Well, with an investigative team, like we've had assigned to this file, they follow up on numerous leads. And when this started, there was lots of work to do, lots of investigative leads to follow up. They've done a good job on following those up. And right now, there isn't enough work for an investigative team to continue. There's enough work for a cold case coordinator to continue on with the leads that are outstanding and any new information that comes in. It's important to note that our cold case coordinator is attached to our major crime unit, and if information comes to light where we need additional resources, we can add them to that from our major crimes unit as deemed necessary.
Do you get the sense that someone within this town, or at least within the Burmese community, knows something that police don't know?
Well, we believe there's people in this community that have information that would greatly enhance our ability to solve this case. Yes, we do. It's difficult to get some of that information out. We've had problems with this community and just with the trust issues with police. They come from a different world where police were not deemed as a trusting entity, and in this country it's quite a bit different. So we think that we have to keep working on this file, follow up on our investigative leads, and maybe at some point in time we will get that piece of information that will lead us to hold those accountable.
Do you believe the person or persons accountable might still be in this community?
You know what? We've had a lot of progress with their investigation, and at this point in time I'm not sure if that's the case. It's possible, but I don't know.
After 5 years, though, why don't you think that the trust is there between the community and police?
You know, it's just that they came from refugee camps with police or with a different style of policing. They come to this country, and now we have to work hard to establish the trust and establish that rapport with that community.
What's your confidence level about gaining that trust and perhaps solving this?
It's an ongoing piece that we're working with the community on at all times.
I've spoken with a couple of members within the community, and they say that mistrust doesn't exist. They say that they recognize that Canada's a different culture and that this isn't, police officers here aren't untrustworthy. They just simply don't think that there's anybody in the community that has anything to say.
Okay, so what's your question then?
I'm wondering how would you respond to the comments from the community saying that no, we don't have a mistrust of police, we just simply don't have any more information to offer to police?
Well, that may be the case with a lot of people, and I'm not sure where that information is coming from, but I think there still is a segment out there that have some trust issues with police. And I'm glad to hear that there's a lot that are confident and willing to come forward and talk to us. And hopefully we'll, with the work that we do with the community, we'll still get some people coming forward with new pieces of information that will help us lead to the ability to hold those responsible for this incident.
What do you know about motive?
You know what? I can't speak to any specifics as part of the investigation, so I won't talk about motive.
But do you know something that you're not telling us?
Well, we have some theories, but without any conclusive evidence, we're not going to be able to go forward with any of those theories, and we wouldn't talk about any of the investigations or the results of the investigation at this time.
What about arrests? I know a couple of years ago you guys told us that you've made arrests in this case, as you do, I guess, in the course of any investigation. Of course, nobody been charged. Have you arrested anybody else in, say, the last year?
I'm not sure about the last year, but you're correct. We did make arrests during this investigation. Those people were brought in. They were interviewed. At the end of the day, we didn't have enough evidence to proceed with the charge, and they were released.
Can you speak at all to tips? Do you get still tips coming in? I'm sure perhaps they peak around like the anniversary. Yeah,
events like this do bring in tips. It brings the event to a public light. The people will see that the police are still dedicated and committed to solving this thing. And you're right, we do get some tips that come in, and if we get those tips, we follow them up and investigate those to the fullest. Now those tips will be going to our cold case coordinator, and he will be following up with that information.
this is a pretty high profile case, as you know. The arrests that were made, was there any thought to make charges, just to have some sort of charges, just to get people in front of a jury and go from there? I mean, there's been other cases where the evidence is mostly circumstantial, where in high profile cases where charges have been laid. I guess what was the rationale for not laying charges here?
The rationale was we didn't have enough information to lay a criminal charge and follow it through in court.
Not enough information to lay the charge, or not enough information to lay the charge knowing that it wouldn't stick in court?
Well, just not enough evidence to proceed in court.
So how many people, officer, did you actually interview and consider? Can you just give a ballpark as to how many suspects you may have sort of considered?
You know what, I'm not sure the exact number of suspects or people that they interviewed. I know we conducted over 200 interviews with the Corinne, or 200 interviews in this investigation. Many were from the Corinne community, and that's something I can confirm.
And what about suspects? In terms of
You know, we're not going to talk about any specifics as far as the investigation and the number of suspects or anything like that.
Has this investigation taken any RPS investigators out of the province or country?
Yes, it has.
How far away?
I believe there's been some down to the States to follow up on some different leads.
Can you just quickly outline the difference between a person of interest and suspect, and how that relates, those differences relate to this case?
Sure. I would say in pretty much every investigation that we conduct, there's persons of interest. They're brought forward by people involved in the case. They'll bring forward a name of somebody and provide some information, and we follow up on it. An investigation is followed, and we let the information and the evidence lead us along the path. So we have a person of interest, we'll follow that up. Sometimes we're able to discount that as a person of interest. Sometimes that person of interest becomes a suspect, which means we have additional information that now points to him with a little more certainty. And that's what I would say is there's a difference. It's a threshold. We have person of interest. A lot of people are that. Fewer people become a suspect, and then fewer yet will become charged and end up in court.
In the arrests that were made, I believe at the time, correct me if I'm wrong, they were all persons of interest and not suspects. Are they now being called suspects?
Well, they were persons of interest at that time. They weren't. They were end up being interviewed and released. So I would say they still remain as persons of interest in this file.
Remain now as persons of interest.
As the 5 years carries on and 5 maybe turns into 6 and 7, I mean, we call them cold cases that make it more difficult to solve as the years go by. Tell us about that.
You know what, I would say it likely does make it more difficult. People's memories aren't quite what they used to be. But as a police service, we're dedicated to and committed to trying to find out what has occurred. Time doesn't matter for us. We'll continue to work on these files. We'll continue to investigate and interview and talk to people and look for that piece of information, that nugget of evidence that'll lead us to the right path. So time, although it may cloud some memories, the police are still dedicated to it and will continue on regardless of how long it takes.
Will you solve it?
We believe we will.
And what makes you so confident?
You know, when our members get involved in these files and we get involved in these things, we always believe we can solve these crimes. And I think that's the optimism that we have. And we will continue to work, and hopefully at some point in time there will be a piece of information that will uncover something that will lead us down that path. And we'll be able to come to some type of resolution for the family, for that community, and for the city of Regina.
Do you think you have the information now? And I'm just wondering, because David was asking about the trust issue. Do you think it's going to be the trust issue that sort of carries the day here in terms of solving this thing? Or do you think you still need more evidence to put this thing to bed?
Well, I believe we need more evidence to put it to bed. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to do that now. So we do need some key pieces of information that we don't have right now to hold those accountable for this.
But do you think it's going to be incumbent upon the Corinne community to provide you with that evidence, or do you think that the police can uncover that themselves?
Well, I think it's not necessarily the Corinne community, but maybe the community at large, the whole community here, or those that have some information about this event to come forward. It'll be the police working with somebody that has that piece of information to make it work.
Could you not just up the reward? I know you just upped it, I think last spring. Why not just keep on going up? Money talks, right?
It may, and maybe that's something we'll look at in the future. We haven't had any discussions on bumping it up from where it sits now at $50,000.
And so so it's one investigator now?
Correct.
In the cold case. And so what does that person do, say, day to day?
Day to day, well, he has a number of files assigned to his unit or to the cold case investigator. He will look at the information that comes in on a regular basis. He gets tasked with, if we get a phone call with some information, he'll get tasked with that information. He'll review it, he'll determine the next steps that need to be taken on this, and he will follow that through.
But is he actively out on the streets, or is he just sort of taking calls?
Oh, no, he's actively following up with these tasks or with these pieces of information. He'll be out conducting the investigation as any investigator would.
I'm wondering about, not to be, the risk of being racially profiling, but with more new immigrants coming into town, does that make police work more difficult in terms of sort of cracking these cultural barriers and perhaps trust barriers and sort of dealing with cases that you ordinarily maybe wouldn't have dealt with 20 years ago, say?
There's definitely challenges associated with those type of cases. You're right, with language and culture, it takes a great deal of work. And we do work hard. The Regina Police Service has a cultural and diversity unit that works hard with the Open Door Society, the Multicultural Council, and we work hard at establishing relationships and working with those people. So we're working on that on a constant basis. So if an event happens, we have a trusted entity that we can talk to and we can work with. Yes, it's a challenge, but I'm thinking that the Regina Police Service is well ahead of the game by working hard at establishing relationships and setting the groundworks for these things moving forward.
Are there different types, again, at the risk of sounding racially profiling, are there different types of crimes that new immigrants might bring to this city that maybe didn't occur 20 years ago?
Not that I recall seeing, no.
Moving into a cold case file, I know in the past there's been investigators who have been on this since day one. What does that do for just morale of officers who've been working on it?
The members that were assigned to this file, they're all professionals. They all worked very hard, and at times I'm sure there's been a personal impact to them and a frustration that goes along with this. They know that there's the optimism that this could be solved with a key piece of information, and they'll continue to have a vested interest in this, but they also realize that at some point in time they have to move on, and these files will still be important to whoever's assigned the investigation, and they'll carry that on.
Do you sorry, I'm not asking you to give me a percentile, but do you have maybe, and if you could, that'd be great, but do you have a sense of what percentage of these cold cases are ultimately solved?
No, I don't. I can give an example. There was an apartment fire that occurred back in the early 70s, and I don't have all the details on that one as far as
I recall the case.
Yes, but
the fellow that was in a Calgary.
Yes, and we ended up laying a charge on that particular case, and that took many years to come through. So I guess that is an example of one of those older cases where we never gave up and continued to work on it, that we're able to come to some type of resolution. So they do occur. I don't know what the percentage is, but they do occur where we come to a resolution on some of these older cold case files.
Are there any unsolved homicides on the books still besides these three?
You know what, I'm not sure right now. I'd have to double check with our cold case coordinator.
It's been whispered by homicide detectives and suggested a bit by police. Do you think you know who did this? You just don't have enough evidence?
We have some theories. Our investigation has progressed a long ways, but at this particular point in time, we don't have the evidence to hold those accountable.
But do you know who is accountable? Or do you know who you think you should be holding accountable? It's just a matter of evidence?
We have theories, but we don't have the evidence to substantiate or to progress with those theories.
That's the best you're going to give me?
That's the best I'm going to give you.
What are the theories?
Again, that's part of the investigation, and we won't talk about that. Sorry.
Is the evidence missing physical evidence or just information from maybe a witness, a person?
You know what, I would say that we just have key pieces of information. I can't get into any particulars on the evidence or any particular types of evidence that we're missing, but we would like additional information.
Can you give us a sense of whether it's someone involved in this community? Like an acquaintance, someone within the Burmese community?
I can't give you that.
It's not a random stranger?
Not that we don't know for sure. We don't have all the information.
Because you guys have an idea of who it possibly could be, would a sting operation be put in place in the future?
Well, I can't talk about any of the investigative techniques that we've undertaken or where we may go, so we won't get into that type of thing either, sorry.
Can you talk a little bit about the rationale for sending the current RCMP officer home?
Well, when the member was released back to the RCMP, he had been with us for the better part of 4.5 years, and we had come to a point in the investigation where he was no longer required. If we need him, we'll make the request and we could bring him back. But at this particular point in time, we don't require his services any longer.
Short-term memory is not that great, so you might have mentioned this earlier, but the persons of interest, have you been able to speak with all the persons of interest that you are interested in speaking with?
I believe so.
So just one cold case investigator on it now. If you need more will be available.
Absolutely. As I mentioned before, it's part of our major crime, falls under our major crime umbrella. We have 10 investigators in our major crime unit. We have a cold case investigator, and we have a couple other investigators attached to it as well. So if the resources require it, they'll be there immediately.
How would you describe the relationship between police and the Burmese community in Regina right now?
I think the relationship between us is quite good. We do a lot of work, as I mentioned before, with the Open Door Society and through our Community and Diversity Unit to establish a strong relationship, and we continue to work at that at all times.
So you don't think trust is a barrier to solving this case, or do you? I'm not quite clear on what your thoughts about these.
There still is some, we believe there still is some trust issues. That's part of what has occurred with those that are closest to this, and I think that's, we'll continue to work on that.
Not to question the intelligence of the investigator, but how long will that investigator sit on this case before it possibly moves to a different investigator?
Well, I'm not sure he's sitting on the case. This case is active. He is working on it. Our cold case coordinator position is a 5-year term for a member. He'll be there for 5 years, and then it may move on to somebody else. But it's an active case. He'll follow the investigation and the information that comes in and follow up with every lead that's there.
Have you ever released, or are you able to tell us how they were murdered?
No, we can't talk about that either. That's part of the investigation, and we won't release that.
Anything on the cost of this?
Well, a cost to the Regina Police Service would be substantial. I don't have an exact amount, but I would say we're into the millions of dollars.
Is that money well spent, do you think?
Absolutely it is.
We have time for, I think, one more question if there is one. Other than that, I think we're going to wrap this up.
You answered them all for me. Thanks.
Thanks, guys.